as I think people who have been on these Zoom calls before know, we try to feature at least a handful of our authors in each issue for a more in-depth conversation about their essays, and also to give our audience a real opportunity to ask you direct questions. And I have a sense, Noah, that there's going to be a really pronounced hunger among the audience to put questions to you. So what I usually do is I typically ask questions for about 40 minutes and then reserve the last 20 minutes for Q&A, and I just choose questions from the audience. I'm going to reserve more time for Q&A, put myself a little bit out of the way because I know that there's going to be a great many people. So to those who are, the hundreds who are filling in the room, there is a Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. And as Noah and I speak and questions occur to you, ask them, ask tough questions, ask what's on your mind. I've been on a stage with Noa, and I know she can field pretty much any question brilliantly and incisively and originally. So with that preface,
I'm Israeli, so I like to talk about elephants in the room. There's like, oh, there's an elephant in the room. Let's discuss that.
I know all sorts of jokes about Israelis and elephants, but I won't get into that. Noa Tishby, as the saying goes, practically needs no introduction, but everyone knows her as an actress, a producer, a former official spokeswoman for the Israeli government, and now a much greater spokesperson for Israelis and Jews worldwide. She is the author of two things that I really want to talk about. One is her latest book, Uncomfortable Conversations with a Jew. I know that's probably backwards on your screen, which she wrote with her co-writer, Emmanuel Acha, the former football player. It debuted on #3 of the New York Times bestseller list. But for our purposes, she is also the author of a really luminous essay in the current just released issue of Sapir, which is titled, a little bit perhaps surprisingly and paradoxically, The Courage to Be Uncool. And I hope I'm not stepping out of line. I don't think most people think of Noa Tishby and think she's uncool.
I'm so happy we started there.
So
I kind of wanted to start there because that was the feedback that I've been getting from people. I can't say this enough. I know a lot of women say this. A lot of it's kind of like the joke of the model. Oh my God, I look like a boy, but like I did. Like I was really not a popular child, not a good-looking child. I wanted to send you a photo before we started, and I forgot. I can find it if you'd like to just prove my point. But this is something that people said. They're like, really? You were uncool? I'm like, no, seriously, I was. And it's not so much that I was uncool, which I was. I had a lot of kind of like kids in school were like ganging up on me and girls, whatever. And I did look like a boy. I really did. People would say, "Ma ta tzarich yeled," like a boy. It was the feeling that I had. I felt like I was an outsider. I had come from a family, the family was divorced. So I was living at home with my mom, and my dad was in another apartment, and he was remarried, and not a lot of kids in my school were from divorced families. And I felt very kind of awkward. I looked awkward. I had short hair. I had the teeth, these big teeth that have fit my face now, did not fit my face. They were tiny little face. And that was the feeling that I had. And when you have that feeling, it almost, when you're a child, when you're 7 years old and you feel like you're just like unpopular, nobody likes you, family home is kind of weird with love, but like weird and unstable and changes. That's the feeling you have growing up. And that changed around when I was 12, when I suddenly looked like a girl overnight almost. So it was a bizarre feeling that I don't talk about often, which it's kind of like I went to sleep and I woke up a boy and I woke up a woman. And I suddenly looked around and society changed around me. Like I didn't change. I'm still the geek. I'm still the boy. But suddenly like boys are starting to look at me funny and they're starting to get confused around me. And it was very weird. So this feeling of an outsider is something that I have felt in my formative years. as a child, which I actually think helped me today. I actually
So,
like
so
that
that's
a
a
lot.
point you make later in your essay that
Yeah.
I want to get to in a moment, which is when you talk about epigenetics. But I want to just for now ask you about your transition, not from almost a boy to a girl, but from Israeli to a Hollywood person to California. And that seems like another moment in which you could have, there's a line in your essay where you say, I was happy to be unpopular rather than keep quiet and pretty, which is how Hollywood prefers its young girls, as we all know,
Yeah.
it's gracefully true. Um, Tell us a little bit about that movement from Israel to Hollywood, and also kind of your coming out quite publicly and proudly as a Zionist in what used to be a very sort of Jewish and pro-Israel kind of town.
So to the second part of the question, I don't feel like I had to come out as a Zionist. I have always been a Zionist. I came in swinging. Like I moved to America and I was like, why isn't everybody a Zionist? You're
Mm.
all a bunch of idiots. So there was never a transition. Anybody and everybody who knew anything about me knew that this is who I am, and I was a proud Zionist, and later on also a proud Jew. At first, I was like, these two things are not connected, and then learning that they
You were
very
more
much.
proudly Zionist than you were Jewish.
Yeah, I was raised in a very secular family. Like I've
Yeah.
never been to a synagogue until I moved to America. Never. Like my father chose to not get bar mitzvah. Like we
Yeah.
were very secular,
Yeah.
very Zionist, but like also very secular. So I didn't actually get the connection between my religion and tradition and culture to Zionism, to the state of Israel. I didn't connect these two dots growing up, which again is very helpful for me connecting them today, because I can explain to people that Judaism is in and of itself an indigenous religion that is inseparable from a place and a land and the moon cycles of that particular place and the species, the indigenous species that have originated in this place, and just the concept of us as indigenous. An indigenous tribe is something that is relatively newer to me. It wasn't something that I was raised with. So I didn't need to come out in Hollywood at all. It was very clear who I was from the beginning, but it was not a popular position to take. And I've been sorry, go ahead. What was that?
Well, so I want to get at that. I mean, you write, at least in one instance, and I think I know that there are more. You have lost friendships
Yes.
over your views, and this long predates October 7th. This
Yeah.
goes back many years. And did you feel like you were swimming against a cultural tide when you were involved in TV and film?
Very much so. Very much so. And I would always have Jews come out of the closet to me. So I would
What's that
be
like?
it's very I was always that person. At first I
Yeah.
thought it was weird, and then I was like, oh, okay, so this Jewish thing is very strong. So I worked with a very famous director one time, and he after the shoot he came to me. He's like, I'm actually like Jewish, my family is Jewish and from whatever. And I was blown away because he never speaks about it. So I was the person that people would come up to and say, oh my God, I love Israel. I'm so connected to my Judaism. I'm so blah, blah, blah. And I would say, oh, great. Would you like to come join me for this event? Or would you
Mm.
be okay posting about it or saying something publicly? And they'd be, oh, no, 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 please, please, no. So Israel was always a thorny issue when it comes to people putting themselves out there for their constituencies to judge. So Hollywood is very much driven by constituencies. People, the actors and the producers and the directors, they're all dependent on the audience, and they refuse to say stuff that isn't popular. They will stick to the status quo. And Israel and Judaism was never something that was in the status quo in Hollywood, even though Hollywood is populated with a lot of Jewish people. They still would always kind of like to keep themselves off the conversation, which is not new. It's how Hollywood started, really. Have you read a book called An Empire of Their Own? Did we talk about that?
Yes. Was it Neil Gabler
Yeah,
or
yeah, yeah.
yeah, I
And
think
he talks
so.
about how the Jews basically invented Hollywood and then kept
And then
themselves.
were removed from the exhibit of the history of Hollywood
Yeah.
until.
But even back then, like inventing Hollywood, but then not telling Jewish stories, just keeping ourselves out. So this concept of not ruffling any feathers, being nice, not rocking the boat, being kind of like polite and quiet stems from an epigenetic fear that the Jews have from being afraid to be rounded up. And that's what to me didn't make sense when I
Okay,
moved here.
you just used a big word that I wanted to get to, epigenetic.
Yeah, this is connecting to our essay. I just didn't think that this never worked for us. And it's something that we've done for generations, this trying to be nice, trying to not upset anybody, trying to not, just being very kind of like polite and reserved is something that never worked out for us. So I came here from Israel. I'm 4 generations Middle Eastern. I'm like loud and I'm in people's faces, and Hollywood doesn't like that. And the Jewish community is very sheepish.
Yeah, sheepish.
Very kind of like reserved. And I'm like, why aren't you, come on, speak up, stand up. And then October 7th
So
happened.
just for the benefit of our audience, tell us what you mean by an epigenetic response.
So epigeneticism was a concept that I heard about 10 years ago, and I was blown away. I read a book about it by this doctor. I wish I remembered the name, but it's one of the first books that came out about the topic. And I was like, whoa. And it in its essence, it's basically epi is above, genetics is genetics. And it's in its essence, they found out that there are traits that are being descending in generationally that aren't genetic, that are something else. And they found out that women that were giving birth around 9/11 had more cortisol and stress levels, stress hormones. They found out that mice that they were spraying mice with orange scented spray and then electrocuting them.
Mm-hmm.
And the mice, obviously, when they smelled that spray, they freaked out, obviously. But they found out that their grandchildren were also freaking out by the scent of orange spray. And when I heard that, I'm like, this is insane. And I read about it. I read that book and I read a bunch of stuff about it. And the first thing that came to mind when I read about epigeneticism, I was like, the Jews.
So I mean, what you're getting at is it's not just psychological trauma that is passed on. That psychological trauma imprints itself in our very genetic makeup. I want to read a paragraph just to give our audience just. You wanted to say something.
To sum it up for our audience, the fears, the stories, the laughter, all the good things and the bad things that the Jewish community have as traits are probably generational. They're probably going down in our gene, in our makeup.
So this is in anticipation of a conversation I want to have with you about October 7th and its aftermath here, especially in the United States. But I just want to read a paragraph in your essay because I thought it was so powerful and so eloquent. You said, "What haunts us, even those of us who have lived through only the most recent pogrom, is the familiarity of even the oldest testimony. Quote, we were awakened by a terrifying noise. We didn't know what was happening 2 millennia ago in Jerusalem. Quote, we realized they'd broken into our neighbor's house. We heard them screaming until silence fell. We thought of escaping into the forest, but everyone who tried to escape found it impossible 1 millennium ago in Cologne. This history has shaped us. Quote, deep inside, I know it. Each survivor says in unison as they stand together at the close of this video." I'm
getting goosebumps just hearing that again.
Well, it's just an amazing piece of prose, and also I think something that I'm sure nearly everyone on this call profoundly relates to. Most recently, of course, with the trauma of October the 7th. You write about that trauma in 2 ways. I think you write about it as an Israeli, but you also write about it as an Israeli living in the United States and experiencing what so many American Jews went through. And I want to ask you about the second part, because we American Jews were in a sense traumatized twice. The first, just the images coming out of October the 7th, the Nova festival, the kibbutzim, the Gaza envelope. But then we were traumatized the next day on October 8th when we saw the way in which our supposed allies and friends were reacting. Can you sort of take us through your day on October 7th and 8th in sort of the way you processed these reactions from people who were suddenly not as friendly as you thought they might be?
Well, this is a tough question because it's always a little uncomfortable to answer it because it's like it's self-congratulatory in a way.
No, go
And
ahead. It's an
I don't
invitation.
yeah, I don't mean to sound like that, but and I hear myself say it over and over again, but we knew this was coming. So I sadly wasn't surprised at all. So anybody who was paying attention knew that we're already not welcome in those circles. Anybody that was paying attention knew that there is a grooming of American society and Western society against Western values that is using the Jews and the state of Israel as collateral damage on a large, much larger plan. Everybody knew that they were planning this. This is why me and my team, when October 7th happened, which was October 6th in LA at 8:30 in the evening on a Friday, we can discuss that night if you like. We knew what was going on. And we weren't shocked by, BLM Chicago posting the paragliders and being like, woohoo, resistant. Like we knew this was coming. They already, there's already been a programming of our society that's been going on uninterrupted for the last 30 years or so to create Israel to be so toxic that people already have this kind of like reservation about it because of this work that was done against it. That was the source of what I saw on Hollywood when I moved here, and that people don't want to touch it. I'm like, but why? And then I realized that people have this disproportionate obsession and this kind of brainwash that has been going on for decades against the single consistent democracy in the Middle East. So look, we were all devastated and shocked beyond belief. But honestly, the biggest shock to me was not that the psychotic jihadists, insane, genocidal or proxy Iranian organizations that are surrounding Israel in order to suffocate it. Not that they would try, but the bigger shock was that they would succeed.
Yeah.
That to me was the biggest shock. Not the American reaction to it, not the left's reaction to it, not the from the river to the sea, not the saying this is resistance, we love it. None of that was surprising. What was surprising was how well organized they were and how did we miss this? That to me was shock.
I want to ask you about that, and now this touches on you sort of from your Israeli perspective. My feeling about October 7th, looking back on it from the distance of about 8 months, is that on that day, the government of Israel failed catastrophically, but the people of Israel succeeded heroically. And I think of so many stories of people living in the very north, reservists getting in cars. I think of my friend Amir Tibon, the Haaretz journalist, in his safe room, waiting for his father and mother Noam to rescue them, which they did successfully. So many accounts of Israeli resilience in the face not only of a kind of a barbaric, not a kind of a barbaric enemy, but a medieval. I think it's actually unfair to the medieval period. But this just utterly brutal, remorseless, psychotic enemy, and also a government that was nowhere to be seen for hours on end, and a prime minister who was not much heard of. But the people succeeded, and I want to ask you about that quality of Israeli resilience on that day, what they were able to achieve, and what that achievement means for those of us who are living in the diaspora.
It's a great, this is a great question. So first of all, it was mind-boggling to see what happened in Israel in terms of the people, in terms of the camaraderie, in terms of the willingness to risk their lives. And it's not just the older generation, like your friend Amir Tibon, who is incredible, but it's the younger generation as well. The ones that were called in as reservists, the one that were called in, the ones that were serving in the military. This generation that we kind of brushed off as the TikTok generation. Oh my God! And the juxtaposition, by the way, from that generation, right, to their peers in America and the Kafia Karens of the world that are like, it boggles them
Wait,
up.
this is new to me, the Kafia Karens.
Yeah.
Unpack that.
Kafia Karens.
Yeah.
Yeah, all these Kafia Karens that are like, and also Becky from Berkeley. And then you should ask yourself every morning, sometimes jokingly, I, laugh with my team. Did Becky free Palestine yet? I mean, did she? I don't know. Did she free Palestine? Listen, we all want the Palestinian people deserve a great life, but Hamas is not giving it to them. And those, Kafir Karens don't get it. So the juxtaposition of the Israeli people and the American left, kind of like that woke crowd. I don't even like to use that word anymore, but that was mind-boggling. The people of Israel are incredible. The people of Israel know in their DNA what to do when they're under threat. We've all heard these stories. So people literally jumped into action. And I have to say, I have seen this in America as well. This is where I'm actually very optimistic. And I know people are very pessimistic right now. And I divide my optimism and my pessimism to short-term and long-term. Short-term, I'm pessimistic. It's going to get worse before it gets better. Or as I say, it's going to get worse before it gets worse. It definitely is going to be a very trying time for all of us. But long-term, don't ever bet against the Jews, ever. And I have seen a similar energetic jump among Americans, among people in Hollywood, among whether they went public or not, right? That were like literally their DNA have been woken up in a way that it's never going to go back to sleep. And I heard this over and over and over again. So the good thing about this is that it's not snakes in the grass anymore. We see it. Everybody knows it. No, when I used to say when I started out, I'm like, you guys, anti-Zionism is anti-Semitism. A lot of people were like, no, there are not a lot of people that are arguing this now. So most people.
Well, there are, but as you said, they're no longer snakes in the grass.
It's like much smaller. And I'm talking about even the broader Jewish community didn't see this connection. So I see this awakening that had happened in the Israeli people, as opposed to the government and the military that were really, it's heartbreaking what happened there in the first few hours and days. But the people woke up like never before. And it was so inspiring and so incredible. And I do see this here in the Jewish community as well. Look at what's happening for the Jewish kids on campus. Like I talk to a lot of Jews, like younger Jews, like high schools and college, and they follow me on TikTok and on whatever. And I go to colleges and I go to high schools and I see them wearing all the stars of David and wearing their yarmulke and going to their Hillel and standing up for themselves in a way that we've never seen before. So actually,
I mean, it's such a good point, because I think similarly, you can go back to the 1970s when the cause of Soviet Jewry captured the imagination of young Jews, and suddenly Jewish kids who were sort of disconnected from their identity were taking trips to Leningrad, meeting underground with Jewish refuseniks, marching in Washington. It was this extraordinary awakening. I want to ask you a point about the book you just wrote with Emmanuel. Again, I'll hold this up for a little bit of advertising. It's a fantastic book. And an important one. It's a book that you're having with an African American. It's unfair to call him a football player. He had a brief football career, and now he has a much sort of bigger career as a broadcaster and public thinker in person. But this was an effort at persuasion. This was an effort at having a difficult conversation with a community, African Americans, who feel a lot of affinity for the Palestinian cause and feel like the Jews are sort of the new white people in the region, colonizing an oppressed minority of color. And what I want to ask you is, how successful can we be, or how much more do we need to do to win over particularly other minority communities in the United States, not just African Americans, Hispanics as well, other communities. Like a lot of us feel like we're losing these groups, and we're losing them in part because we just haven't quite figured out how to make the case. You obviously made that case to Emmanuel. So how do we make it again, or how do we broaden it?
So first of all, we have to understand this is a marathon, not a race. We can't, there's no fix-it question that I can say, oh, we do X, Y, and Z, and tomorrow everything is going to be fine. It's not. It's going to take a long time to change, to turn this ship around, because again, this has not, this erosion of Israel in the world and the pinning on the Jews, everything that's bad in the world, it's not by accident, it's by design. It's been worked on for a very long time, specifically with the Black community, specifically with social justice causes like the Women's March, specifically with this, like using intersectionality against the Jews, flipping it around. So this has been very clever, and it's going to take a long time to change. Now, all I can give is an advice for anybody that's here on this call or listening to this later. Do what you can do to make a change. People always ask me, like, how do I become a better social media activist? And I'm like, don't even worry about it. It really isn't relevant if you post some stuff to your 60 followers. It makes no difference. But here's what does make a difference. Invite your non-Jewish friends for Shabbat. Go volunteer at a homeless shelter. Go get elected to your city hall. Like, Jewish becoming more active in civic spaces again is something that is crucial to change the ship around. And here's the other thing where I'm optimistic. The majority of America, ethnic or not, are not crazy. They're the silent majority. The ones that are insane on the fringes are the loudest ones, but the quiet ones are the ones that we need to talk to. I am not interested in sitting down and having a conversation and trying to change the mind of Omar or Talib. I don't. And when people ask me about that, I'm like, I don't care. Why would I try so hard to befriend somebody that literally hates me? Why? That's, again, that feeling of being uncool, feeling of, okay, I'm okay with people not liking me. I'm not even worrying about Ilhan Omar. I don't care about her, or Gigi Hadid for that matter. But it's the ones that are in the middle, the ones that are quiet, the ones that want to have that conversation. Those are the ones that we need to talk to. And look, a lot of them in the Black community and a lot of the Hispanic community are people of faith. And it's very important for us to reach out to people of faith, because when it comes to people of faith, there is no confusion about, for example, the indigeneity of the Jews to Israel. There is no confusion about that. And there is a lot of confusion on the Kafia Karens about who's indigenous to the land of Israel. So reaching out to the communities where we can convince and we can persuade and we can find allyship is crucial, and every single one of us can do it in their own community.
Yeah, you're raising a number of thoughts. I was talking with Rabbi Buckdahl from Central Synagogue a few weeks ago, and I had the thought that there was a book a few years ago called 10% Happier by a reporter who sort of took up meditation, became 10% happier. We need to become 10% Jewier. Just not 100%, not even 50, just 10% more Jewy. The
or
other
100% or 50%, whatever. Let's not limit.
No, but start smart. Have reasonable ambitions. 10%. 10%.
I feel like that's why I'm a good person to have these conversations, because I was raised so secular, so liberal, so progressive, so on that, and to find the beauty of our culture and tradition from a place of kind of like the universal part of Judaism is very powerful.
So I want to just, before I'm going to turn very soon to the questions from the audience. But you said you're long-term optimist. Unpack that in two dimensions. First of all, in Israel, where it looks like, the war is not really won. We might be gearing up for a second war with Hezbollah. The government is as unpopular as ever, shows no signs of leaving. But you're an optimist about Israel, A, question, and B, the American diaspora community, and I'm seeing some of the questions that are coming in. A lot of anxiety here. What's that optimism about?
So let's start with Israel for a second. Israel will have to course correct when it comes to a lot of things, and I think the majority of Israelis understand that. Everybody understands the meltdown, breakdown, shock, and awe, and everything that went down on October 7th and after. In terms of the war, I don't understand the rationale of trying to win over a group of jihadists that are running towards death and trying to kill themselves and as many more people as possible with death. I just don't understand the rationale. I'm not a military operative, but I'm like, but they want to die and they want to kill as many more people as possible. We care about how many Palestinians die more than they do. Why is that a threat for them? So we need to figure out a different threat for that jihadi culture. The thing that Israel will need to do, and that the Jewish community around the world will need to do, but specifically for the region, right? So not so much for the diaspora, is show the world the risk of jihadism for the world. So something about Americans and we Westerners, and when Iran says death to America, death to Israel, death to America, they don't hear it. They're kind of like, that's cute, it's hyperbole. No, this is literally what they are after. There is a risk in radical Islam and jihadism that isn't equal to every other risk that we have dealt with. And it's not Islamophobic to say that. Saying, as Sam Harris, saying to somebody, you're just being an Islamophobe, is gaslighting that person. Because, and that's why I stopped using the word terrorists in almost all my communications, because there's been this whole, one man's terrorist is another man's freedom fighter, like all that crap. Like Osama bin Laden actually had some good points. Like if you don't know about this, for our
I
listeners,
know. It's happening with
there was a
18-year-olds.
TikTok trend when they found some interesting things about what bin Laden was saying, right? So I stopped using that. I'm not using the word terrorist almost ever anymore, but I'm using the word jihadists. If you are for jihadism, we have a problem. This is not freedom of religion. I will not allow for the religion that wants to kill me. So Israel will need to course correct in terms of how do we deal with this worldwide threat of jihadism that is threatening Israel and Western civilization, together with the moderate countries in the region, with the moderate countries in the world, and fight this together. It's not going to be about winning over Hamas. For all intents and purposes, Israel already won over Hamas. Hamas, the military is saying, the IDF is saying, Hamas is pretty much like done, right? The big win would be, how do you geopolitically like suffocate this movement that is threatening, again, Israel and the world? So that's in terms of Israel. In terms of the diaspora, the Jewish diaspora, which I will put in I'll put in just the Jewish people around the world. I am super optimistic about this because I have the past to look at. And I have history to look at. And if you bet against the Jews, we know what happens when you do. Like, we know what happens to people that does, right? So to me, it's what we're dealing with here. And I've said that from day one after October 7th, from October 6th at night. I said, we're dealing with something that is generational, that we need to look at from the prism of 5,000 years of Jewish existence, not from 2025 in America or 2025 in Israel, or 25 in France. No, zoom out and look at everything that's happening right now from thousands of years of Jewish existence. And what do we usually do when things like this happen, which they happen? This is not our first rodeo. We come together, we fight it, we communicate, we know how to do it. In our DNA, we already know how to solve this. All we need to do is actually listen to that. And to go back to our op-ed, the mistake we made was that we thought it was over. The expectation that it was over was the mistake, not that it's happening again. Of course it'll happen again. It always does. And we know what to do with it. That's why I'm optimistic.
Okay, with that, I am going to look for some questions that there are a lot of people who are freaked out. Tamara Haddis says, I feel unsafe anywhere in the United States. Yeah. And there are a number of questions just like hers.
I just want to say to Tamara and everyone, let's not be idiots, right? But stand your ground. Stand your ground. I posted a photo the other day of me and I posted a story of me and my son at an airport, and he was wearing a Tzahal, an IDF t-shirt. And I'm walking through the airport, I'm wearing my stars and he's wearing the t-shirts. And I'm like, you just stand your ground. It's okay to be afraid. Obviously, it's appropriate to be afraid these days, but also stand your ground. Don't cower, don't hide.
Yeah, and it's also it's the people who don't care about being seen as cool who ultimately get to be known or admired for being if not cool, at
No,
least
no
being.
polite people ever made history, right? Is that saying or something like that?
That's very true. Josh Cohen asks, as an American Jew traveling to Israel for a month-long volunteer program in September, what would you advise I do to best optimize my experience so that I can come back to the US as a better, more informed representative of the Jewish community? And
Oh
then
my
he
God.
wants to know about how to buy a hard copy of Sapir. We'll get to that question later.
I feel like you already know the answer, Josh. If you're going to Israel for a month to volunteer, you're doing the right thing. Make sure you go down to the south. Make sure you see with your own eyes the pogrom that they have inflicted on us, and make sure you listen, for lack of a better word, and put as much money into the economy as possible. So eat as many restaurants as you can. People are really struggling there right now, so we need to do whatever we can to help them out. But it feels like you're already doing that, unless I'm wrong. If you're going to volunteer, you're ahead of everybody else here. Or
Okay.
maybe not everybody. I don't want to judge everybody.
Aaron Wolkowski asks how to deal with the as a Jew Jews, Jewish organizations and their anti-Zionist narratives. I think he means groups like Jewish Voice for Peace.
Yeah. Right.
It's mind-boggling to say the least. How do I prevent my Gentile friends not to consider that as valid, even if it sounds like it? That's, I think, a terrific question. So how do we deal with the as a Jew phenomenon?
As a what did she say? I don't want to mention her name. As a white privileged Jewish, and I'm like, you're not white, dude. You don't even look white. It's hard to deal with those people. I talk about this in Uncomfortable Conversations with a Jew, because the way I see it is, and it's not to the answer of how to deal with them. How to deal with them, I'm not entirely sure, because we just need to be loving, compassionate, painful, and try to communicate with these people. But I do believe that there is something to the effect of this self-hating concept, because those people have heard for so many years how terrible Israel is and how horrible it is, and they feel ashamed, and they don't know the facts, and they don't know that they don't understand the connection, the indigenous connection of Judaism to the land of Israel. So it's very hard to figure out how to deal with those people, because they're wrong.
You know, I
Just
had Jonathan Chait, who's a columnist for New York Magazine, had actually a very good answer, because the as a Jew phenomenon is almost entirely a phenomenon of the political left. And
totally. Oh,
what
entirely.
what he will say is, well, if you have African Americans at a Donald Trump rally, very prominently placed right behind Trump, does that then mean that the MAGA movement doesn't have a racism problem? Because after all, right? I mean,
Yeah.
and you can argue, you can people who are more centrist or on the right would argue and say, well, no, he doesn't. But for the left, I think it's a devastating argument. Just because you have the presence of a handful of Jews who say that Israel should be washed away, doesn't make that argument any less odious.
It's 100% tokenization of these Jewish voices. There's no question about that. What I give as an example to that is that, yeah, there is a Black person that we know that says that slavery was a choice. So I can find that Black person. We know who that Black person is, but nobody takes it seriously, and nobody thinks that it's a representation of the Black community at all. Very much the same. You can find anti-Zionist Jews, like literally, that wants Israel to be taken down. Not representative, very small community on the fringes of the fringes.
An anonymous attendee asks a question, which in a sense you've already answered, but I think it's important to get to this. Why do we know, or maybe the question is, when do we know when to leave and get and go back to Israel? Like, when will we know? Will there be evidence to convince you that it's time to leave this place?
I have no idea. This is very similar to what the Jews in Europe were thinking at the time. I don't know. I think that a strong Israel and a strong diaspora is important for the Jewish community at large. So I wouldn't rush to run away from everywhere that we are and all go to Israel, because it's a network. The one of the strengths of the Jewish community, and this is a concept by Giddy Greenstein, who's a friend of mine and a dear thinker, is that a part of the strength of the Jewish community is that it is decentralized. So we have lived like that since the days of Yavne. Like we've lived like that, that there's a rabbi to each community, and each community decides for itself, and then it strengthened the conversation and it strengthened the Jewish people. And I think that we should aim for that and fight for everything that we can, because anti-Semitism rise is usually, as we know, an indication that something is off with society. And we are again here to show the world that something is off with society. And it's our job to do that, whether we do it from here or from Israel. So I wish I can give you as soon as this happens, get out. I don't have that sign, but I do feel like a diaspora Jew and an Israel Jewry is very important for our the continuation of us as a nation and our strength and our resiliency.
Well, this is sort of apropos what you just said. Alan Londy, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, notes that anti-Zionism among young American Jews is an increasing reality.
Yes.
And he adds, I find it almost impossible to carry out a thoughtful conversation with these people. So
by the way, it's not that the anti-Zionism is a reality, is that they are upset about what's happening in Gaza. They don't understand what's going on. And if you ask them, yeah, but would you like Israel to be taken down by all means necessary, including a lot of October 7th? Most of them would say, no, that's not what we mean. So even the usage of anti-Zionism when it comes to the younger community, they might be pissed off at Israel, which is fine. But a lot of them, I would venture to say, don't want Israel to be destroyed in like a bloodbath of 9 million people happening, or 7, I guess, because it's only the Jews. I guess the Arabs and the Christians will be spared when it comes to a massacre in Israel.
Yeah, I had an interesting, just very briefly, an interesting encounter. I was in Sydney a couple weeks ago at a public event, and I was asked about what I had to say about Israel being a settler colonialist state, and how can you justify a settler colonialist state? And I said, I'm in Australia.
You remember where we're at, exactly.
And I think that's just about all I needed to say, except to add, I mean, everyone sort of got the point immediately. I didn't see any Aboriginal people in the audience who could at least justifiably say they are real Australians. One point I made, and I think this is important to point out, is that the oldest
they are real Australians, and we are the real Jews too. Like we are the indigenous people.
But actually, I think it goes beyond that, because the oldest continuous anti-colonial struggle in history is Zionism. And what I said to this young woman who asked the question, I said, do you know what Hanukkah is about? It's kind of like Jewish Christmas.
Passover.
The Jews light their candles. But what is Hanukkah about? Hanukkah is about resisting Greek imperialism, right? Yeah. I mean, you go through history, and you can go before that to the Babylonian captivity, and you find Jews fighting an anti-colonial struggle against various, Babylonian, Greek, Roman, Byzantine, Mamluk, Ottoman, and British empires, for 2,500 almost continuous years. And this young woman looked sort of stunned that this hadn't occurred to her. Okay, I'm going to go back to our audience.
Listen, it's yeah, you can't colonize a country you're indigenous to.
Chloe Valderies, this is not a question, but I think it's a comment not worth noting. And Chloe is a friend and a friend of Sapir. She says, she quotes, "You invite your non-Jewish friends to Shabbat. Yes, you have to be an active, constant community with the other communities. It really is as simple and as profound as that. It is not a one-time thing. It is recurring." Could you comment on that? That's such a smart point.
That's exactly it. That's exactly it. Before we were welcomed as white passers, right? We felt uncool. We felt unwelcomed. And we were very active on like a local level, not just like a high level. We helped start the NAACP. There's the Rabbi Heschel and Selma. We were the Freedom Riders. We were there in the front line with like oppressed groups. And at some point we were given the white passing card, and we're kind of like, oh yeah, I guess we're good now. So I think on a person to person level, this bond has eroded a little bit. And into that bond that had eroded came these nefarious forces, these BDS movements, these forces that are trying to take Israel down, and like kind of like created the schism between our communities, between the Black community and the Jewish community. The Hispanic community it's not as prominent. This anti-Zionism, anti-Semitism is not as prominent as it is in the Black community, but still. So this is exactly it. If you can go get elected to a local, like your local city hall, and create a affinity group with your friends in college or whatever it is that we can do to be out there again for other communities, knowing that we are never going to be fully accepted, and that's okay. That's who we are.
We have so many questions, and I feel bad that we're not able to get to even half of them. Lori Russman has a personal question. Any advice for newly converted Jews like me regarding how we can most effectively help improve the dialogue?
Oh, that's such a great. First of all, love converts. Arguably better Jews than most of us. Actually, they say that b'makom she'ba'alei tshuva omdim tzadikim gemurim le'yamdu. So they actually say that there's a because if you chose, Lori, to come join this crew that has been, political football and a persecuted kind of minority for generations, thank you so much. You have a unique voice because of who you are. So you have a unique voice because you can actually tell people why you chose to join this this group of people. And you can do that on, again, the local level, on the friends. I don't know what you do for a living, but everybody has a group of yoga friends, and everybody has, if they work in the office, or so being active in those circles is a great way to do it. And communicating and talking about your personal experiences. There's nothing that people want to hear more than personal stories.
Barbara, now I'm going to ruin this last name too. Chasser, one or the other, Chaser. How do we win over the media, she asks? Even the hostage rescue was somehow flipped by the media. The focus was on the quote unquote dozens who had been killed versus the innocent hostages who were rescued. How does the narrative change? And I'm more interested in your answer than mine.
I know, right? First of all, isn't it ironic? There were like 4 citizens held by citizens that are affiliated with Hamas, and they're like, oh my God, you killed so many people. Trying to stop holding citizens. Stop, basically, don't hold them hostage, and then you won't be at risk. This is again a part of the erosion and the brainwash that has been happening. There have been organizations that have put reporters in positions of power. The media was also skewed against Israel very, very slowly, but very effectively. This is a part of the bigger picture that we have to do. Again, I do not have an easy answer to that. What I say to people now is this is a 30-year struggle that we're up against. This is what we need to do. And people are shocked.
And the point you make is so well taken, that it's a 30-year, if not longer, process of grooming an entire or multiple generations to just assume that Israel is the settler colonialist state, kind of gratuitously oppressing people for the most perverse motives.
And just to add on to what you said, what people need to hear, right, is that these Kafir Karens and their friends are convinced that the Israeli military or Zionists are indiscriminatorily killing Palestinian people for fun, in exactly the same way that in the 1500s, Christians were convinced that Jews are indiscriminatorily slaughtering Christian babies for matzahs.
Yeah.
Exactly the same thing. They are convinced that Israel is this bloodthirsty, in the same way that they were convinced that Jews are bloodthirsty. Same exact thing, just different, just newly branded.
Here is a question from David Jaffe. How do we look at civil divisiveness or civic divisiveness in Israel now, Haredi versus others, and move toward Klal Yisrael, to wholeness in one Israel? How do we bridge those gaps?
I don't know from which community you come from, but if you come from the Haredi or modern Orthodox community, I think it's very important to speak up, because there's no Chadut Israel, there's no unitedness if there's no education. So in my first book about Israel, I talk about the Haredi community, and the one thing I cannot explain is how is the Israeli government paying for schools that don't teach core curriculum. This is one of the things that I don't think American Jewry understand, or the diaspora, probably everybody on the call understands better. They don't teach them math or English. So there's a 14% of the population that is trained to be ignorant and cannot contribute towards the GDP, cannot be a part of the Israeli society. And this has to change. Like drastically, this has to change. So forget about even joining the military. The military needs some of the people and don't need some of the others. And yes, but education has to be given to everybody else, because otherwise, how can you have Achdut Israel? How can you have one united voice in Israel when they literally don't teach them anything other than Gemara, which is important to teach, but also English?
Yeah. A terrific question from Mark Neugbauer. What is Noah's advice to parents of Jewish children who are apparently anti-Israel? I think he means the kids. How do you deal with Jewish friends who are too?
Wow, it's a great question. So I wish I had a bit longer time on that, but I'll try and go reverse on this a little bit. I believe the Jewish education failed us. I believe that they failed our kids profoundly, and I've been talking about this for years now, because here's the thing. We've put our kids through high school and through elementary school and through, the Jewish camp and everything. We taught them all these Jewish values, and we have avoided, when it comes to Israel, the tough, thorny issues. So kids show up on campus, they're completely ill-prepared. They understand that, guess what? Israel is not a unicorn, utopian, invented, perfect place. It's a country, and it has issues, and they see and they hear it for the first time from somebody else and not from us. And they think that we lied to them about everything else. And that, to me, is one of the biggest source of this turn that we have seen with the younger kids, the younger Jewish kids, because Seth Rogen said that. He said that a few years ago on Mark Maron's podcast. And when I heard it, people were very upset about it, but I was like, oh, I get it. He said, I was lied to. And when I moved here as a progressive Israeli, I was blown away when I heard, I don't think they use this anymore, but they used to at the time. They used to say something like a people without a land go to a land without a people. And I'm listening to it and I'm going, what do you mean without a people? There were people there. Like, the existence of the state of Israel, the safety, security, the justification for it does not require that we lie about it or omit information. It's a country, and it's not perfect. That's why in my first book, there's a chapter about the settlements, there's a chapter about Arab Israelis. We have to discuss this with the kids. So I believe that if we can discuss the thorny issues about Israel with the kids and acknowledge that there are issues with a country because it's a country, they're going to be a lot more tolerant and a lot more understanding for the importance of the existence of the state of Israel to begin with. If they think that we lied to them, they're going to be very upset.
Yeah, that's true.
I tried to say it really quickly because we're almost out of time, and I think that's a very important question that we need to address in the Jewish community.
Equally, this is a sort of a question in the same vein, but I think it's important to get your answer. Diana Grand asks, how do you talk to people who see the killing and destruction of neighborhoods in Gaza and call for a quote unquote genocidal Israel to immediately stop the quote unquote murder of innocent Palestinians?
It's very complicated. I think one of the problems that Israel is not doing is that it's not hiring military experts to talk about how Israel is actually conducting the war, because no matter what you think of the government, and I have a lot of thoughts, and no matter what you think about what happened on October 7th, and we have a lot of thoughts, the Israeli army, I had a briefing the other day with a military expert, and he said something that was mind-boggling to me. You will not find a single Western general, military expert that will tell you that Israel is not operating in Gaza in a most outstanding way. And that's one of the, look, nobody likes to see these photos. There is destruction. It looks terrible. Nobody wants to have innocent people killed. There's no question about that. But also, when it comes to, for example, America in Mosul and what's happening in Gaza, even though the land is way worse, because you have to understand, Hamas have created the most fortified region in the world in Gaza. Some of these tunnels that are 700 kilometers long are 3 stories high. There's a 15 meters, and then there's 35 meters, and then there's 40 meters, one on top of the other, with trucks that can drive in each one of them. It's insane what was built there. So the pictures are horrible, but also we need military experts like John Spencer and like others to actually talk about what Israel is doing in Gaza, which sadly is horrible, but not as bad as anybody else. And it's a war of no choice. We had to go in there. They're embedding themselves in the population. To the Wall Street Journal text messages of Yahya Sinwar, to him, it's okay. We need to sacrifice as many people as we possibly can. So I think more military experts needs to be deployed by Israel and by Zionist groups to counter that narrative.
Doris Fine asks, how can a secular universalist Jew deal with the Israeli right-wingers who are taking up guns to threaten Palestinians and who claim all of Israel from a Jewish religious perspective?
Be absolutely against it. No other, you can't justify it. Can't justify it. It's horrible. It should stop. Thank God it's only fringes of Israel, but it needs to stop immediately.
Pamela Dean mentions Ortega y Gasset, and I just want to mention it just because when else do you get to talk about Ortega y Gasset, the Spanish philosopher and essayist who wrote that a barbarian was a person for whom no argument makes a difference? It's just a comment, but I think it's irresistible to someone with my educational background.
Yeah.
Carol Y asks, how does the Black community acknowledge the Ethiopian Jewish people?
I wish they would more. A friend of mine, a Black actress, went to Israel for the first time, Jewish. She went to Israel for the first time, and she calls me after 48 hours, and she's like, oh my God, it's not even a white country. So seeing it was believing it. Seeing it was acknowledging it and being like, whoa, I didn't even realize that. It's very interesting. There's a lot of denial that this is even a thing. You know, again, Israel was branded a white colonialist country. Everybody thinks of Jews not as an ethnic group, but as Jerry Seinfeld, and we need to undo that. The fact that Jews come in every color, every shape, and every ethnicity, and that we are an ethno-religion, not a religion, and we're certainly not white, is something that we have to rebrand.
I'm looking for one question to close this out. Bonnie Cohen wants to know, were or are you against the judicial reform?
Yes, absolutely. Very much so. You can Google it and look me up on Bill Maher. I actually got fired by the Bibi Netanyahu government because I spoke up against the Israeli, the proposed, judicial overhaul. I was Israel's first special envoy for combating anti-Semitism and delegitimization. When the government changed, I elected and opted to stay in my position, even though I was against the government, the structure. I was like, there's not enough women, not very religious, and the judicial overhaul was proposed, and I kept quiet for a while, and then I spoke up. I wrote an op-ed at Ynet in Israel in Hebrew, and then I went on Bill Maher, and I didn't speak about against Israel. I didn't speak against any politician specifically, not against the government, not against Bibi, but yes, against these proposed laws, which to me, specifically one of them, there were a bunch of them that were just like riffraff and chit chat and whatever, not that, not, you know, more semantic than anything else, but there was one law there that would have given the government the right to overturn a Supreme Court decision by a simple majority, and that to me would have weakened Israel democracy. And I spoke up against it, and I was fired by it, and I'm totally okay with that. Which proved my point that you can be you speak up against Israeli laws or political situation or whatever, and still be a staunch Zionist.
And you can measure yourself not only by the friends you have, but by the enemies you make. Noa, thank you for a wonderful conversation. I want to just tell the audience, I'm so sorry. I think we could have probably gone for 2 hours. The questions kept coming in, and they were terrific as always. It's an honor to be able to have you in the pages of Sapir, also at sapirjournal.org, to read your essay. And it's wonderful to have this community of really engaged readers who care about creating a thriving Jewish future, which is what we're all about. So no, thank you for your time, and enjoy the rest of your afternoon.
Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone.